things like that will change, and how we are part of the support for the monarchy may change slightly.
What happens when a royal dinner meant to celebrate unity suddenly turns into a scene straight out of a political thriller? Imagine a room filled with world leaders, aristocrats, flashing cameras, and priceless jewels. And then, without warning, someone stands up and shatters the entire illusion of royal perfection. That is exactly what witnesses claim happened the moment Princess Anne allegedly pointed directly at Queen Camilla and demanded, right there in front of stunned guests, that she remove the legendary Williamson diamond, the iconic jewel once treasured by Queen Elizabeth II. Yes, you heard that correctly. Not a quiet conversation behind palace walls. Not a discreet royal discussion handled by aides. A public command. For a few seconds, the Grand Hall reportedly fell into a silence so heavy you could practically hear the chandeliers trembling. Diplomats froze, cameras kept rolling. And suddenly the question on everyone's mind became impossible to ignore. Why would one of the most disciplined and private members of the royal family publicly challenge the Queen Consort? Was it a misunderstanding, a power struggle, or something far more explosive hiding behind palace doors? Because according to whispers from inside the palace corridors, this confrontation may not have started that night at all. In fact, insiders claim the Real story began 10 days earlier, with a missing diamond, a mysterious midnight visit, and a secret that someone desperately tried to bury. The whispers inside the palace corridors did not begin with that dramatic moment in the Grand Hall. According to several palace insiders, the tension had been building quietly for weeks, maybe even months. And if you know anything about the British royal family, you know that when tension simmers behind those centuries-old walls, it rarely ends in polite tea and biscuits. At the center of the storm were two very different personalities: Princess Anne, often described as the most disciplined and no-nonsense member of the royal family, and Queen Camilla, the woman who spent decades navigating scandals, public scrutiny, and the complicated path to becoming queen. Royal watchers have long noticed that the relationship between these two women was, let's say, professionally polite but emotionally distant. Anne, the daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, built her reputation on duty, tradition, and a strict respect for royal legacy. Camilla, on the other hand, rose to power through a much more controversial journey, one that tabloids followed for years like a never-ending soap opera. Different personalities, different priorities, different visions of what the monarchy should represent. And insiders say that difference had been quietly creating friction ever since the royal transition following the late Queen's passing. But then something happened that turned quiet tension into a full-blown palace mystery. About 10 days before the now viral royal banquet, Princess Anne reportedly carried out a routine inspection of several royal exhibition rooms, areas where priceless historical artifacts and jewelry are stored before diplomatic displays. Normally, these inspections are nothing more than formalities. A checklist, a quick look, maybe a note to security. But this time, something was wrong. When Anne approached the glass display containing the legendary Williamson diamond, a jewel famous for its rare pink glow and deep connection to Queen Elizabeth's legacy, the room suddenly felt off. The velvet cushion was there. The spotlight was on. The protective glass case was perfectly intact. But the diamond? Gone. No alarm had triggered. No broken locks, no smashed glass. Just an empty space where one of the most recognizable royal jewels on earth should have been. According to a palace staff member who later spoke anonymously to a tabloid reporter, and reportedly stared at the empty display for nearly 30 seconds without saying a word. Then she quietly asked security a single question: who accessed this room last night? That simple question triggered a wave of quiet panic behind palace walls. Security teams began reviewing logs, checking access records, and scanning surveillance footage. But almost immediately, something even more suspicious appeared. The security cameras covering that corridor had gone dark for several minutes during the early hours of the morning. A glitch, officials initially claimed. But insiders say Princess Anne wasn't buying it. Because just hours before the cameras mysteriously stopped recording, one particular royal figure had reportedly been seen walking through the west corridor late at night, wrapped in a silk scarf, moving quickly, and clearly hoping not to be noticed. And yes, according to multiple palace staff whispers, that figure looked very much like Queen Camilla. Now, was it simply a coincidence? Maybe. But then came the first twist that made the entire situation explode. A leaked message began circulating among royal aides. Someone had reportedly seen Camilla leaving the exhibition wing that same night, her hand partially hidden under her cloak, but reflecting a faint pink sparkle under the corridor lights. A sparkle that looked suspiciously like the famous Williamson diamond. Suddenly, what began as a quiet missing jewel investigation turned into something much bigger.
a palace secret,
a potential betrayal, and a confrontation that, if true, was only days away from becoming a global spectacle inside the palace. The atmosphere began to shift from quiet suspicion to full-scale internal investigation. What had initially been treated as a minor security anomaly was now turning into something far more uncomfortable. A missing royal jewel was bad enough, but the possibility that someone from the very top of the royal hierarchy might be involved, that was a crisis no palace press office could easily spin. According to several anonymous staff sources, Princess Anne reportedly ordered a discreet internal review of the palace security system.
No police announcement, no press statements.
Just a handful of trusted technicians quietly digging through server backups and security logs late into the night. And that's when investigators stumbled upon something unexpected. Buried deep in the system's temporary memory was a fragment of corrupted footage recorded just minutes before the cameras mysteriously shut down in the exhibition corridor. The clip was blurry, distorted, and partially glitched, but one detail was unmistakable. A figure wearing a long evening coat approached the secured entrance leading to the royal jewel display rooms. Then came the moment that reportedly made several technicians look at each other in stunned silence. The biometric panel recognized the person instantly.
No alarms, no security alerts, just a quiet green confirmation light.
Which meant whoever entered that room had top-tier royal clearance. Moments later the footage dissolved into static, as if someone had deliberately overridden the recording system. Inside palace walls, that discovery changed everything. Because suddenly the mystery wasn't about how the diamond disappeared.
It was about who had the power to make the evidence vanish.
But before the palace could quietly contain the situation, something else happened. Something modern royal institutions fear more than almost anything. The internet got involved. Late one evening, an anonymous account claiming to be a palace staff member posted a cryptic message on Twitter. Strange things happening in the royal vault rooms this week.
Cameras off. Jewel missing. Big name involved.
Won't stay secret for long. At first the tweet barely attracted attention.
Then a royal gossip blogger reposted it. Within hours the speculation exploded.
Online threads began appearing across social media, each one trying to decode the mystery.
Some users suggested a simple security failure.
Others wondered if the jewel had been temporarily removed for restoration. But then a second anonymous post dropped, and this one sent the internet into absolute chaos. The message read, "Ask why Camilla was seen in the West Corridor at 2:03 a.m. 3 nights ago."
Suddenly the rumor mill went into overdrive.
Clips of old interviews with Queen Camilla resurfaced. Royal commentators started debating whether tensions inside the palace had been underestimated for years. And hashtags related to the missing Williamson diamond began trending internationally. One viral tweet read, "If the Williamson diamond is really missing, someone inside the palace must know exactly where it went." Another post racked up hundreds of thousands of likes within hours. Imagine the scandal if this turns out to be a royal family power move. Even celebrities began weighing in. A famous television host joked during a late-night monologue that the British monarchy had just turned into a Netflix drama without the subscription fee. Meanwhile, royal commentators on television panels argued over whether the rumors were irresponsible speculation or the early signs of a genuine palace scandal. But behind the scenes, the situation was becoming even more complicated. Because while social media debated theories, palace investigators reportedly received a new piece of information from an unexpected source: a young security guard assigned to patrol the West Corridor on the very night the cameras went dark. At first, the guard had remained silent. But according to leaked reports circulating among journalists, the young officer eventually approached senior staff with a nervous confession. He claimed that during his patrol, he saw someone leaving the exhibition area shortly after the security system malfunctioned. And in the dim corridor lighting, he noticed something glimmering in that person's hand.
Not gold, not silver,
but a faint, unmistakable pink reflection. The same color associated with the legendary Williamson diamond. If that testimony was accurate, it would transform the situation from palace gossip into a potential royal scandal unlike anything seen in decades. Yet one question still remained unanswered. If investigators already suspected what had happened, why had no one confronted the Queen yet? As insiders would later claim, the answer was simple and deeply strategic. Because according to sources close to Princess Anne, she wasn't planning a quiet confrontation behind closed doors.
She was waiting for the perfect moment. A moment when the entire world would be watching. And that moment arrived sooner than anyone expected.
The Grand Palace banquet that week was supposed to be a celebration of unity, a glittering diplomatic evening filled with international guests, ambassadors, celebrities, and cameras from every major news outlet in the world. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the marble hall, Orchestral music drifted through the air, and the royal household moved through the crowd with the usual careful choreography of tradition and spectacle. But beneath the polished smiles and formal greetings, a quiet tension lingered. Because insiders say Princess Anne had already made her decision. She wasn't going to bury the truth. She was going to expose it. The evening began normally enough. Guests mingled. Journalists captured elegant photographs, and commentators praised the stability of the monarchy in the post-Queen Elizabeth II era. Then the doors opened, and all attention turned toward the entrance. Queen Camilla stepped into the hall wearing a striking black velvet gown, moving slowly through the crowd with the composed confidence expected of a queen. Cameras flashed rapidly as photographers documented every detail of her appearance. But it wasn't the gown that captured everyone's attention. It was the jewel. Pinned prominently against the dark fabric, glowing under the chandeliers, was a breathtaking pink stone that royal watchers instantly recognized. The legendary Williamson diamond. For a moment the guests simply admired it. After all, the diamond was one of the most famous jewels in the royal collection. Seeing it displayed at such a prestigious event seemed perfectly fitting. But from across the hall, Princess Anne had already noticed it. And according to witnesses, her reaction was immediate. She didn't smile. She didn't applaud. She simply stared. Then, without warning, Anne stepped forward through the crowd. Conversations slowed. Cameras shifted. Something about her expression made people instinctively move aside. When she finally reached Camilla, the room had grown noticeably quieter. The two women stood face to face under the chandelier light. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Anne raised her hand and pointed directly at the diamond. Several guests later claimed her voice carried across the entire hall. Calm, cold, unmistakably firm. Your Majesty, she reportedly said, that diamond belongs in the royal collection. Not on display tonight. Gasps rippled through the room. No one expected a royal confrontation, especially not in front of diplomats and international press. Camilla appeared momentarily stunned. Witnesses say her polite smile flickered, replaced by a look of confusion that quickly turned into visible tension, but before she could respond, Anne made another move. At her signal, palace staff activated the large display screens normally used for speeches and ceremonial presentations. Instead of diplomatic graphics, the screens showed a short piece of recovered security footage. The blurry corridor. The late-night figure approaching the exhibition room. The camera signal cutting to static. Whispers spread through the hall like wildfire. Then came the final blow. From the side entrance, the young security guard stepped forward in full uniform. His voice reportedly trembled at first, but he repeated what he had already told investigators, that on the night the cameras failed, he saw someone leaving the exhibition wing holding an object reflecting a pink light. A light identical to the Williamson diamond. In that moment, the atmosphere inside the hall changed completely. What had begun as a glamorous diplomatic event suddenly felt like the climax of a courtroom drama. Cameras flashed faster than ever. Guests exchanged shocked glances. Some diplomats reportedly began quietly whispering to aides. And Camilla stood completely still. For a few seconds she said nothing. Then, slowly, her hand moved toward the jewel. Observers later described the moment as painfully quiet. One clasp released. Then another. Finally, the pink diamond left the fabric of her gown and rested in her trembling hand. Without speaking, she placed it on the velvet tray brought forward by a palace official. No dramatic speech. No argument. Just silence. Within minutes, the banquet's celebratory mood had completely collapsed. International media outlets began broadcasting breaking headlines. Royal commentators on television described the confrontation as one of the most shocking public moments in modern royal history. Some praised Anne for protecting the legacy of the crown. Others argue the scene risked exposing dangerous fractures within the monarchy. Across Twitter, debates erupted instantly. Anne just protected her mother's legacy. Or she just embarrassed the entire royal family on live camera. Supporters applauded what they saw as an act of fierce loyalty to Queen Elizabeth's memory. Critics questioned whether the confrontation should have been handled privately. Either way, the story had already exploded into a global spectacle. And inside the palace, one uncomfortable truth remained impossible to ignore. This was no longer just a rumor about a missing jewel. It had become a public royal scandal. One that might leave lasting consequences for the House of Windsor. If this moment proved anything, it's that the truth inside the royal palace may be far darker than anyone imagined. Did Princess Anne expose the truth to protect the royal legacy, or did she publicly cross a dangerous line against Queen Camilla? Comment your opinion below, because this royal scandal might just be getting started. And if you want to see the next shocking twist in this story, make sure you subscribe now.